The rain lashed against the windshield, each drop a tiny hammer blow against the glass. Mark gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles bone white. He was late, agonizingly late. His sister, Emily, was graduating, a milestone he'd sworn he wouldn't miss. He could almost hear her voice, bubbly with excitement, as she described her dress, the after-party, her dreams for the future. A wave of guilt, sharp and bitter, washed over him. He'd let her down before, and been the most reliable brother, but this was unforgivable. He glanced at the empty passenger seat. Just hours ago, it had been occupied by Sarah. Sarah, his ex. The thought of her name, even now, months after their messy, painful breakup, sent a jolt of something akin to electricity through him. They hadn't spoken since the shouting match that had ended everything. The words flung like stones, leaving wounds that refused to heal. But today, her voice, tight with fear, had broken through the silence. Her mother, she'd said, her voice choked with sobs. An accident. She needed to get to the hospital desperately, and her car, it was out of commission. He'd hesitated. Just for a moment, the memory of their last argument burning in his mind. But then, he'd pictured her face, pale and stricken, and the image of her mother, a kind, warm woman who'd always treated him like family. He couldn't refuse. The drive to the hospital had been excruciating. The silence in the car was thick, heavy with the weight of their shared history, the unspoken regrets, the lingering hurt. He dropped her off at the emergency room entrance, a hurried, awkward exchange, a ghost of a touch on his arm. He'd mumbled a good luck, and then, with a screech of tires, he'd sped off, the image of Emily's hopeful face spurring him on. But the rain, relentless and unforgiving, had slowed him down. The traffic was a nightmare, a sea of red taillights stretching as far as he could see. He'd curse his luck, curse the rain, curse himself. He should have left earlier. He should have... Suddenly, headlights flared in his rear-view mirror, too close, too bright. He instinctively tensed, bracing for impact. A car, coming from the opposite direction, had swerved, veering into his lane. He slammed on the brakes, a futile gesture. The world dissolved into a cacophony of screeching tires, shattering glass, and the sickening crunch of metal. He woke to the sound of sirens, the flashing lights painting the rain-slick asphalt in a dizzying strobe. His head throbbed, a dull, persistent ache that pulsed with every beat of his heart. He tried to move, to push himself up, but his body felt heavy, unresponsive. A paramedic knelt beside him, his face etched with professional concern. "Don't move, sir. You've been in a bad accident." His mind was a swirling vortex of confusion. The other car, Sarah, he had to know. He had to know if she was all right. A wave of nausea rose in his throat. He remembered the fear in her voice, the desperation in her eyes. The other car, he managed to croak, his voice rough and strained. Was anyone else? The paramedic hesitated, his gaze shifting away for a moment. When he looked back, his eyes were filled with a mixture of pity and dread. "Sir, it was a head-on collision. There was only one person in the other vehicle." His heart hammered against his ribs, a frantic drumbeat of fear. "Sarah, was it Sarah?" The paramedic nodded slowly, his expression grim. I'm so sorry, sir. She didn't survive the impact. The words were like a physical blow, a punch to the gut that stole his breath. Sarah dead? It was impossible. Just hours ago, she had been beside him, her presence, even after all that had happened, a familiar comfort. He remembered the last thing he'd said to her, a hurried, dismissive goodbye as he'd rushed to leave. He'd been so preoccupied with getting to Emily's graduation, so desperate to avoid the awkwardness between them, that he hadn't even looked back. Now, he would never have the chance to say goodbye. He would never have the chance to tell her what. What would he have told her? That he was sorry, that he still cared, that he regretted the way things had ended? The rain continued to fall, a relentless curtain of water that blurred the flashing lights and washed away the debris. But it couldn't wash away the guilt that was now a cold, heavy stone in his chest. He'd lost her, not once, but twice. And this time it was final. Emily's graduation, the celebration he'd been so desperate to attend, seemed trivial now, utterly insignificant in the face of this devastating loss. He was left with nothing but the gnawing ache of regret, the haunting memory of Sarah's face, pale and fragile, and the crushing weight of what might have been. He'd tried to outrun his past, but it had caught up with him, leaving him broken, alone, and forever haunted by the what-ifs.